The morning light filtered through the worn blinds of the inner-city community center, casting soft shadows on the training mats where 20 young students stood in disciplined rows. Chuck Norris paced before them, his movements precise and controlled. His black GI was crisp despite the rising heat, a silent testament to his unwavering discipline. For these kids, ranging from 6 to 16, this dojo was more than a martial arts class. It was a sanctuary. True strength isn't about domination. Chuck's voice carried over the quiet murmur of synchronized breathing. It's about protection. The students bowed in understanding before moving into their next form. Chuck watched them with quiet satisfaction. This was why he had chosen this place, a neighborhood where hope was often a fleeting thing, where discipline and honor could mean the difference between survival and falling into the cracks of the streets. But peace was a fragile thing. And as the morning class settled into their routine, the echoes of heavy footsteps in the hallway shattered it. The two men who entered did so with the confidence of predators. Their suits, neatly pressed, stood in sharp contrast to the scuffed mats and faded walls of the dojo. Their badges glinted under the fluorescent light, but Chuck had seen their kind before. The taller one, with a sharp face and cold eyes, scanned the room like he owned it. His partner, broader but shorter, carried a smirk that promised trouble. Chuck's youngest student, Tommy, flinched at the sight of them. The boy's father owned a small grocery store nearby, one of several local businesses that had recently struggled with a sudden surge in inspection fees. Chuck's jaw tightened. He already knew what this was. Class, take 5. His voice remained calm, but his students sensed the shift. They bowed and stepped aside, though some lingered near the edges, wary. The taller inspector stepped onto the training mat without removing his shoes, a deliberate show of disrespect. Gasps came from the younger students. Chuck said nothing, but his silence was heavy. Chuck Norris, the man drawled. "We're here about concerns regarding this facility." He pulled out a thick folder and let several papers slip to the floor. "Quite a list of potential violations we've got here." Chuck studied them, noting the way their hands hovered near their jackets, a telltale sign of more than just official documents beneath their suits. "Those signs were installed last month," Chuck said evenly. "During our regular safety inspection. They're clearly visible from every angle." The shorter inspector snorted, moving to the water fountain and turning it on. "Water pressure's too low." "Another violation." Chuck's eyes narrowed. "The water pressure meets city code requirements. We had it checked just last week." The taller one closed his notebook with a sharp snap. "Listen, Mr. Norris. We can stand here all day listing violations, or we can have a productive conversation about how to handle this situation." His voice lowered. "These things can get expensive fast, but there are always ways to expedite the process." Chuck's students exchanged worried glances. They had seen this kind of shakedown before. They had watched their parents struggle with the same. Chuck's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "Why don't we continue this discussion in my office?" He turned to his senior student. "Michael, lead the class through their forms." As he guided the inspectors toward his small office, he felt the eyes of his students on him. This place was supposed to be their refuge. He wasn't about to let corruption take that away from them. Chuck led the inspectors into his office, a small but well-kept space lined with framed certificates, photos of past students, and an old punching bag in the corner. He closed the door behind them, blocking out the murmurs from the training hall. The taller inspector, who had introduced himself as Cole Davidson, took a seat without waiting for an invitation. His partner, Martin Tate, leaned against the filing cabinet, crossing his arms. "Let's cut to the chase," Norris, Cole said, flipping open his folder again. "The city has been reviewing properties in this district, and frankly, your operation here isn't looking great. Safety concerns, building code violations, and a lack of updated licensing. We're looking at thousands of dollars in fines." Chuck didn't blink. "Funny, my last inspection cleared everything." Cole smirked. "City regulations change fast. You know how it is. But we're reasonable men. There's always a way to work things out." Martin reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. "There's an offer on the table. Some investors are interested in this property, looking to revitalize the community." Chuck took the paper and unfolded it. A buyout offer. Generous, but not nearly enough to match the real value of the building. He let out a slow breath, understanding now. This wasn't about safety violations. This was a move to force him out. "I'm not selling," Chuck said simply. tossing the paper onto the desk. This place means something to the people who train here. Cole's smirk faded slightly. That's a shame. We'd hate to see the city force you out due to unfortunate circumstances. Chuck leaned forward, locking eyes with Cole. That a threat? Martin chuckled. We prefer to call it a business opportunity. Chuck remained silent for a long moment, then slowly stood. His presence, though calm, carried weight, a lifetime of discipline behind his every movement. Gentlemen, you've delivered your message. Now, I suggest you leave. Cole sighed, standing as well. Have it your way. But don't say we didn't warn you. The two men left without another word, but the threat lingered in the air long after the door shut behind them. Chuck clenched his fists briefly, then exhaled. He needed a plan. And fast. The next morning, Chuck wasted no time. He reached out to local business owners, community leaders, and the parents of the kids who trained in his dojo. If the city and the so-called investors thought they could push him out quietly, they were in for a fight. Word spread fast. Flyers were distributed, social media exploded with posts about corruption in the zoning board, and a petition to protect the community center began collecting signatures by the hundreds. Even the local news caught wind of the scandal. Within days, what started as a silent power play had turned into a full-blown public battle. As expected, Cole and Martin didn't take the resistance lightly. A second inspection was ordered, this time with an exaggerated list of infractions, some so absurd they bordered on fiction. Chuck expected as much, but what they hadn't counted on was the community rallying behind him. Parents, students, and longtime residents gathered at the community center on inspection day, standing in silent protest as the officials arrived. The inspectors pushed through the crowd, but the weight of the public eye was on them. Every move they made was recorded, and every false claim met with immediate rebuttals from those who knew better. By the time they left, it was clear their intimidation tactics weren't working. The next step was the city council meeting. Chuck, along with local leaders, presented their case. The community center was a vital resource, and the attempts to shut it down were rooted in greed, not public interest. Evidence of corruption within the zoning board was laid out for everyone to see, including financial ties between Cole, Martin, and the investors looking to take over the property. The council chambers were packed, standing room only. The pressure was too much to ignore, and after hours of heated debate, the decision was made. The fraudulent violations were dismissed. The inspectors were placed under investigation. The community center was granted historic status, legally protecting it from future buyout attempts. The night after the ruling, Chuck stood outside the community center, watching as parents picked up their kids, laughter and conversation filling the air. The fight had been long, but it had been worth it. Hank, one of the longtime business owners who had supported the battle, clapped a hand on Chuck's shoulder. Told you they couldn't take this place from us. Chuck gave a small nod, a rare smile breaking through his normally stoic expression. They never stood a chance. As the last of the students left, Chuck turned off the lights and locked up, knowing that for the first time in a long while, the community center was safe. The war was over. And they had won.